The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines. Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Welcome back to another CSRM podcast. Greg Linville here with two very, very special guests across the pond, and yet we're all still in that COVID lockdown time, and we want you to know that this is done by all the protocols of our government, where we are, I think, sufficiently socially distanced, and therefore we're not wearing masks. But just to say that we're not in our studio and not using our normal stuff, so you may hear a couple glitches there or so. And there's even children running around in the background of some of our places here, and so you may hear some of those squeals and sighs of delight. But it's a live recording, so welcome back. And Rob and Jamie, welcome to this segment of the CSRM podcast.
Pleasure.
Well, Rob, you and I have a few years under our belts together. People just need to look at the color of my hair, and they'll know that it's a little bit more than what Jamie is involved with us by. But you tell us a little bit. Your background is as a sports person at the very high level. Tell us about your sports background first.
Yeah, I grew up in an academic's home, and he wanted me to be a lawyer, but I wanted to be a professional soccer player. You can imagine a little bit of a debate there.
Now you say it's soccer. I thought you would call it football.
Well, I would, but I'm trying to be kind of relevant and friendly to
our American listeners. Yes.
That's right. So I'm going to call it soccer. So that's what I wanted to be. Like I say, lots of debate, but eventually you could see that I've got some ability. And I signed with a professional club, Wolverhampton Wanderers, who are now in the Premier League. But they were in the Premier League then too, but it wasn't called the Premier League, it was called the First Division. So I signed as a youth professional, and I was there from about the age of 10 all the way through to 19. Then they let me go. And then I went into semi-pro soccer with what we call the National League. That's the league before the professional league. And then from there I went to Houston to play for Houston Dynamos briefly before it folded for a while. And that's where we set up soccer ministry. And we were in Houston for 6 years and then Dallas for 5 years doing soccer ministry.
And that ministry still goes on?
It still goes on under the name of Sports Quest. A man called Jim Spence, who was my roommate at college, also my best man. And
Wow.
And he came over in 1992 and worked for YSI, and then formed his own organization, Sports Quest, and he's still there today.
And
he does it much better than me, by the way.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that when I was first introduced to you by our friend Jim Riley, Jim said, "You must meet this chap. He is incredible," talking about you. And he said,
Yeah.
this particular man is the second greatest evangelist that I've ever met, and I've met Billy Graham. so he really had a high view of you, and I thought, well, I must meet him, and I was glad that we were able to connect those years ago, and we've continued to move through. And many people have heard our story of you taking me around Wales, and I saw your evangelistic heart and how you were reaching everybody around you. and that you and I have had some very significant times praying for Wales, praying for the world through Wales, and it just is it's one of my life's greatest joys, Rob, to know that you and I have been partners in this gospel ministry for these decades now. Of course, a little bit of my lineage, the Jones family came from Wales, and so I'm sure those in Wales would recognize the Jones name.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's been a privilege to have you as a mentor for all these years. You put yourself out for me. You've always been there, and I do appreciate it, Greg.
Yeah.
And I know many others would appreciate it too.
Well, and we've mentored each other through a lot of things, and we've served in a lot of capacities. And what we're going to be talking about today is how you've continued on in your journey. So you gave us a little bit of your sports, but Rob, give us a little bit of where you've come through the ministry world and kind of that spiritual journey, if you will.
Sure. When after about 6 years, there was a call on my life to go to seminary. It was like a kind of a preparation kind of call, where I just really knew that that's what I had to do. And that's when we left Houston to go to Dallas, and that's when Jim Spence took it on. And like I say, he's done a far better job than me. But went to Dallas, Fort Worth, went to Southwestern Seminary, got a master's in divinity, became an ordained Southern Baptist minister, and then was sent by the IMB to Wales as a missionary. Now, I know that sounds very mixed up, doesn't it? It would be so much easier if I had an American accent. An American missionary to Wales, that kind of makes sense. But where it ends up is an English guy with American spiritual roots in Wales as a missionary. And the good thing about having a relationship with Jamie is he knows what that feels like. It's people confuse our motives, people confuse our accents, people confuse, what we're about. But our heart is to serve people, win people, and disciple people.
So you started in some sports ministry, and then you've moved on through that, and you've done some very unique things in Wales. And part of what we're doing in this series of podcasts with you is inviting people to come and maybe join you, that their churches can partner with you, that people can come and do some long-term, meaning months, not weeks, worth of, and maybe years of service with you in Wales. And we're going to get to that in a little bit, but how did you get from that faith and that IMB to where you are today?
Well, I think I owe a lot to sports ministry, a lot, because that's where I think I learned. Sometimes you have to learn the hard way. It's great to learn from books, and I think seminary did that. Helped me to put a theological framework around what we do. There's no doubt about that. But oftentimes you have to learn from mistakes and experiences, don't you? And I noticed in both the Houston soccer ministry and the Dallas soccer ministry that the coaches, the evangelist coaches that I would invest in would respond to, number one, some good education, to give them those opportunities to get coaching badges, to give them opportunities to go to conferences, to read books, and to become educated in the faith, to learn with their head, but also the opportunity to practice with their hands, to have different age groups that they coached, not just only coach one age group, but both genders, different age groups, different situations in prisons and abroad, give them all sorts of opportunities to get their hands dirty. It was like as if the head, what they were learning, and then the hands, what they were doing. And then I gave them all mentors. I provided mentors for every single one of them. Found some older guys that were ready to invest. And each of these young coaches, evangelistic coaches who were good quality soccer players, qualified teachers, that's how we got them visas, but also loved the Lord Jesus Christ and wanted to share. They all had about 4 or 5 teams. and they would all be at different age groups, but they all had a mentor, an older fella who would invest in them. And we found that those three things work really well: to learn with the head, to practice with the hands, and reflect with the heart. But I didn't know what to call it. I didn't quite know how to explain it until I went to seminary. We put a theological framework around that. So that needs to be said, because even when I came with the IMB, we began to set up discipleship school that had that. We designed some accredited training through a seminary here in Britain to make sure that all of our students had some good quality theological education. We helped our students to get involved in churches and organizations where they could practice their skills, whether it be with children, with youth, with adults, with homeless, in music, in sports, in creative arts, whatever it might be. But then also to have a mentor, someone who walked with them and listened to them and asked them what they were learning with their head and asked them what they were doing with their hands and how that might become applicable to their lives. And we began to put that theological framework around it. They would go away with an accredited course, but they'd also go away with they'd be doing 35 to 40 hours of ministry every single week. You know, that's a year's full of ministry, but then a mentor to guide them through that. And he'd help them to process so that they not just did it, but they were able to think it through so they could teach others to do it.
We call that in the CSRM world the producing of reproducing reproducers.
Yeah.
And really, that's what I hear you talking about.
That's it.
And I know also that you undergird this with a whole lot of prayer, and that is in itself something that is very significant to the Welsh culture. That even you might even see on the back of here, I have the St. David's cross, of which when you and Rob, our good friend Rob, McAvoy, took me down to St. David's, and we saw the prayer in your country has always been so significant. And I love what you're saying. We phrase those three things in this way, and I think it resonates, that we give information to the head, transformation to the heart, and then formation for ministry, hands-on. And I think we're right on that with you. So then you now are asking people to come and be supportive of your mission and your ministry. Tell us how we can do that. Is that you, or is that Jamie, or is it both of you?
Yeah, I still think that's still myself. Just before we pass to Jamie, I would say that this is a mutual thing. This is not just something to benefit us here in Wales. We now, for the last 19 unbroken years, we've brought American young people between the ages of 18 and 27 over to Wales to gain a British Christian leadership qualification, accredited British qualification, to get involved in, like I said, 35 to 40 hours of ministry, linked in with their skills and the needs of the churches and the organizations we work with, and then to have that mentor working with them. We've been doing that now for 19 unbroken years, and we've only lost one person that didn't go full term. We're really proud of that. And I think we can provide a mutually beneficial learning experience, a life-changing experience, actually. A life-changing, learning, growing experience to young people, like I say, of that 18 through 27-year-old age group. When they come with us for a year, we sort out everything. Jamie will explain all of that. Everything's sorted for them, and it's designed so they grow. But in growing, they bless Welsh churches, they bless Welsh organizations, and they bless Welsh people. It's a mutually beneficial win-win situation.
So we're really talking, one of the manifestations, that Missional Link Wales is involved in, is in this mentoring ministry, of which quote, interns can come from anywhere in the world, and that you actually put them into a training program. But it's not just a program, it's a relationship, and it's continuing to input into their life so that they can be transformed for the rest of their lives. Do I have it there?
That's right, yeah. And more than 200 people have been through it in one way or another, and it's just been incredible to watch what they go on to do. They go on to be missionaries and teachers. They go on to be headmasters. They go on to be business people, lawyers, doctors. They go on to be all sorts of things. Pastors, youth ministers. It's wonderful to watch.
And so folks would want to come to this because of a number of reasons. It might start out as that their lineage comes from Wales, and I always wanted to go. But maybe it becomes even more to the heart and to the calling of life that they are saying, I'm going to take this gap year. I'm going to fulfill some of my educational goals. I am going to get this intercultural, international experience. But through it all, I'm going to be trained. I'm going to be mentored. I'm going to be transformed. And that this is something that they can really sink their teeth into, and you can help them do that. Now, we'll talk about some of the specifics in our next segment, but about how they can get involved, and I think that may be where Jamie comes in at. But in these last couple minutes, Jamie, just share a little bit with us your experience. Do you have an athletic background as well?
It depends what friends you ask.
Well, okay.
But certainly no. I've always grown up. I loved athletics itself, soccer, to stay in line with Rob here. Certainly not the levels of Rob in soccer in any way, but always played ever since I can remember soccer. A British lad. That's what we do. Rugby. So always just been passionate about sport and loved the outdoors, and every English boy's dream, and I'm sure many Welsh boys too, is either play for rugby or soccer for your country. So certainly loved sport, Greg, that's for sure.
And then tell us, you were born and raised, and where did you meander in your life?
Yeah, so it has been a meander following Jesus and his call on our life. So I was raised down in a beautiful part of England called the English Riviera, down in South Devon. Very blessed and grateful to live there, just down on the ocean, and went to school. Had parents who believed in Jesus, not necessarily practicing walk with Christ too much, but had an awareness of Jesus. So I just grew up going to school, playing lots of sport and everything else. And at the age of 18, that's when I just came to a part of my life thinking, well, what's this all about? I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And I just thought, what's the point of, going to work every day, earn money to spend on food and all that, hopefully get to play a bit of football. That's it. I just came to a point of hopelessness and just not having any purpose or any direction, certainly no vision for life. So it was fantastic. I got invited to church and received Jesus at the age of 18 in a tiny little village in South Devon called Sheldon, which is, funnily enough, become one of my favourite places for my family to go on vacation. But it's there I tried drowning myself on a local beach, and I had a new job being 18. I tried taking an overdose at night. So just messed up and hopeless, and yet totally transformed when I received Jesus into my life, and suddenly, as we do, received purpose, vision, realized who I was in Christ, all those great things. So that was when I was 18. Served in a small local church there for many years, and then went to visit a church up here in South Wales, and that's for Connection. I came up for a conference. It just blew my mind to think this could be church, because I'm coming from a place of 10 to 15 people. Again, fantastic church, but came up to a large church in Wales at the time of probably around 1,000 people. That's definitely not typical of Wales in any way, but very, very strong musically and teaching and things. It was just fantastic. So I would drive up to Wales and back every Sunday for about a year. Now, to our American audience, it's not very far. It's about a 2.5 hour drive each way. But to British people, that's how far sometimes they drive on vacation.
Right.
But I was passionate for Jesus, and so drove up for a year there and back every Sunday. And then I moved up and became one of the youth pastors here in Newport in Wales, supporting other youth pastors in the church. And after a period of 4 years here, just really sensed the call of God to go to Bible school in Seattle, to a church called Christian Faith Center. So got on a plane. The day before getting on the plane, I was told there's no accommodation for you. They had tried, but there's nothing for you. And I was, well, I know Jesus has called me, so I'm coming. So fortunately, someone picked me up, but had a wonderful season of 2 years in Seattle to start off with for Bible school. Got my degree there. And one of the, next to my salvation, the next most wonderful thing in my life was meeting my wife there in Seattle. She was a Connecticut girl. I came over to be a school teacher just really in the same period of time when I arrived there. I got there in September 2000. And I'm grateful to say I married up. She agreed to marry me. So we came back to Wales, got married here because of visa requirements we had to follow. And then in 2003, we just really felt we wanted to be back in Seattle to serve the church we'd been part of there while I was Bible school and she was a school teacher. So we ended up being back in Seattle until 2011. So, and during that time, we just really had it on our hearts to come back to Wales. It's funny because I appreciate what the state of Washington is quite unchurched compared to many states in the US. And yet to us being from the UK, it felt extremely church. We're part of a church of 10,000 people, multiple campuses. And we felt like saturated sponges, wanted to make a difference back here with young adults, with young marrieds, with the need here in Wales is great. Less than 2% of our nation are what we'd say evangelical Christians, and the need is huge here. So we followed the call of God to come back to Wales. No real connections with anything. But I came back, worked for the Welsh government for a year. My wife started teaching in a wonderful small Christian school in the village we live. And within a year, that's when my best man for my wedding, who's called Rob, connected me with Rob Burns. And I think the rest is history, really, Rob, isn't it? So that's been the journey.
Well, we're going to pick up on that story in our next segment. And we're going to give you all that are listening or watching this an opportunity to know how you can personally get involved with Missional Link Wales, either as that intern that can come over and spend a number of months, a year or so there, or you can connect with them in a lot of different ways for short-term, but also for financial and prayerful support. As you all know, these ministries and these missions don't run on what we call in America a dime. That it takes much more than that. And so we're going to give you opportunities to get involved with this kind of thing. But Rob and Jamie, thanks for being with us on this segment, and we will pick it up on our next one. Talk to you then.
Thank you.
CSRM's podcasts are a resource provided by the Association of Church Sports and Recreation Ministries and its production house, Overwhelming Victory Flicks. This episode was produced by Dr. Greg Linville and edited by Andrew Fouts. For more information about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.